Song for a Whale, Chapter 32. Our next stop, Skagway, was a pretty town, but it was hard to think about anything but Blue 55. Everything I'd worked for would be happening the next day. I'd gone through so much to make it happen, and then I couldn't believe it was time. At least I hoped it would be. 55 still wasn't singing. Maybe my song would work, and he'd start singing again when he heard it. Grandma and I ate burgers and onion rings at a restaurant that used to be an old saloon. When it was time to pay, Grandma handed the waiter a $50 bill and left a big tip. Had some luck at the casino. Nice. Keep winning. And you can live on the ship all the time. Grandma laughed at this. I wish. After lunch, we did some sightseeing around town. A small crowd in a park watched lumberjacks with chainsaws carve upright logs into sculptures of bears and salmon. From there, we wandered into the downtown area. Grandma stopped at the door of the gift shop and asked, "Want to look around in here?" The shop took up most of the block and had everything from bumper stickers to t shirts to packaged salmon. Postcards with Alaskan scenery filled a spinning rack. Right then it hit me how much I missed my family. I couldn't stand to think about how worried they were, so I've been trying not to think about them at all. It wasn't working. I shuffled through a few cards with animals on them, then settled on one with a picture of a breaching humpback whale and Alaska written in cursive letters in one corner. At the cash register, I paid for the postcard with change from my pocket and stepped aside. With a pen I borrowed from the counter, I filled out my home address on the three blank lines on the back of the postcard. Next to that was space for a short note. Dear Mom, Dad, and Tristan, I wanted to let you know I'm thinking about you. Please don't worry about us. Sorry for leaving without telling you. I just had to find the whale. Love, Iris. When the customer at the counter left with his bag, I showed the cashier the postcard, then taped the place stamp here, square in the corner. She pointed across the street and said, Post office. I found Grandma browsing through the t shirts, just going across the street to mail this, I told her. I'll be right back. She held up a green I Break for Moose t shirt to check the size. Okay, I'll stay here and look around. I hadn't been to many post offices, just one near home sometimes when one of my parents had to mail a package, but this had to be the tiniest post office in the land. It looked more like a little cabin with wood paneling all around the inside walls. Only one person worked at the counter, and a few people stood in line. I wanted to ask if I could go ahead of everyone since all I needed was one stamp, but that was probably against post office rules. Instead of hanging on to the card, Instead of hanging on to the card to send later, I gave it to the postal worker to mail for me right then. By the time it got to my house, our trip would almost be over. The important part, anyway, if Blue 55 was in Appleton like he should be, I'd be meeting him soon. Nothing else would matter after that. My family would know I'd been thinking of them and not just myself. I didn't see how I'd get any sleep that night, thinking about how close I was to Blue 55, about all I'd done and how far I'd come. We'd be sailing into the sanctuary's waters soon. We might even be sailing by Blue 55 right then. He needed to sing again, so I'd know. I'd open the sound file on my phone so I could feel his song against my hand and wished he was out there joining in. If I didn't get to sleep by 6, I'd go out to the front of the ship and watch us pull into Appleton. At some point, I did fall asleep. When I woke up, Grandma's bed was empty. I sat up in bed, wondering where she could be. Maybe she was just out for a walk. That was the kind of thing she would do. But in the middle of the night, I grabbed my coat and wandered into the hallway. Empty. Maybe something came up and she didn't want to bother me. Or could this be like the time she took off for the beach without telling anyone? But she couldn't have gone far. We literally were on the ocean. I couldn't think of where to look for her. It was too late for any classes to be going on. Usually, if she wasn't in the cabin, she was out on the deck reading or watching the water. It'd be too dark to see much, but I couldn't think of where else to check. The ship was as busy in the middle of the night as it was during the day. People swam in the pools and mingled around in the bars, carrying their umbrella drinks. I had to try to think like Grandma. Where would she want to go? The casino. Even though I wouldn't be allowed in, I'd have a good chance of spotting her from the wide doorways. A crew member kept his eye on me as I stood at the edge of the casino entrance. I guess to make sure I wasn't going to run in and try my luck at a slot machine. The place was packed, even in the middle of the night. As far as I could tell through the haze of the cigarette smoke, Grandma wasn't there. Same thing on the opposite side when I circled around to the other entrance. Some of the machines weren't visible from where I was, so I'd check back later if I had to. It was impossible for one person to search the whole ship, but I looked everywhere I could think of. I even tried the internet cafe and the library. When I didn't find Graham at the pool, out on the deck, or in any of the diners, I went back to the cabin to see if she'd returned. Still not there. She should have left me a note at least. Nothing on the desk except the daily schedule and JoJo's business card. I turned to the back of the card where JoJo had written, "Customer relations can page me if you need anything." Did she mean at any time? Of course she would be asleep, but this was important. This wasn't a call for extra towels or a room cleaning. What if something happened to Grandma? I ran back to the elevator, clutching JoJo's card. Maybe the people at the customer service desk wouldn't need to call her, but they'd find Grandma somehow. Surprisingly, I wasn't the only one who needed customer service that time of the night. Three people were in line ahead of me. They couldn't possibly have anything as important as a missing grandma. While I waited, I tried to think of where else to look. Finally, it was my turn. When I stepped off the carpet onto the concrete floor in front of the counter, vibrations tickled my feet. I slipped out of my shoes and stood there in my socks. Music was playing somewhere nearby. Loud music, with those low bass sounds that really shook a radio speaker. The man behind the counter waved to get my attention, saying something that looked like, "Can I help you?" I shook my head and stepped aside to let the passenger behind me take his turn. The thread of a memory waited for me to grab onto it. Something about what Grandma had said that first night on the ship. The carpet muffled some of the music, but there was enough of a vibration for me to follow. It grew stronger as I ran, shoes in hand, toward the stern. In front of the Tipsy Marlin bar, I stopped. During the day, it was always empty. Not now. The bar was packed with people dancing and laughing and holding drinks. At the front of that crowd and the lights of the stage, hands flying, was Grandma. A banner hanging from the ceiling read, "Tipsy Marlin Karaoke Night." As far as I knew, there weren't any other deaf people on board, but everyone was watching Grandma. This must have been going on for a long time because she'd taught the audience some sign language. The words "break it down" appeared on the lyrics screen, which Grandma signed. Then everyone did some weird dance and signed together, "Stop, hammer time." It was like Grandma was singing a language everyone in the world understood. Mom wouldn't believe this. She'd been waiting for Grandma to make friends, and now it looked like she'd made a whole roomful. Watching Grandma reminded me of humpback whales that leaped out of the ocean. The symphony players. If someone could write Grandma's signing on sheet music, every color would be splashed all the way up and down the musical scale and off the page. I was too amazed to be mad at her. As I stood there holding my shoes in one hand, I wondered if my own family would feel the same way about what I'd done. I'd wandered off too, much farther than Grandma ever had, but if they saw that this was where I was supposed to be, that I was doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing, maybe they'd understand just a little. The way Grandma looked then, that was how I'd feel when I met. That's how when I would meet Blue 55. She also taught the audience how to do deaf applause. Instead of clapping when the song ended, everyone waved their raised hands. As Grandma stepped off the stage, she got a standing ovation. I didn't care if I wasn't allowed in a bar. I ran to Grandma and hugged her, then stepped back. How? I couldn't even finish my sentence. I'm sorry to worry you. I didn't think I'd be gone for so long. I couldn't sleep, so I got up to take a walk around the ship and stumbled upon karaoke night. I mean, I pointed to the stage. That. How did you do that? After I watched some of the performers, someone tried to get me to go up and sing. I told them I'm deaf, and they asked me to sign the songs with them. Pretty soon, I was doing my own performance and getting the crowd to join in. Looks like everyone had fun, right? Yes, it did look like everyone had fun. More importantly, Grandma had. I'd wanted to make that trip by myself. For the first time, I was happy that a plan of mine failed, so I could be right there with Grandma.